Okay, so sorry. So the mentorship platform, it's almost like Etsy for coaches. So everyone on Leland kind of runs their own business, and we use Leland as an infrastructure. So I'm teaching this free class through Leland using their infrastructure, but I'm a coach. I don't work for Leland, if that makes sense. So if you join Leland with this QR code, you can see all the benefits. It's free to sign up. There's lots of free resources. We have a library of different materials. It's not just for law, it's for all sorts of different things. There's career counseling and lots of MBA and all kinds of grad school and job coaching and stuff. So I encourage you to join. If you scan this QR code, you will be able to join really easily. I've been with Leland about 2.5 years now. Welcome to everyone who just joined. Okay, so my name is Indrani, and I used to work at Stanford. I was actually the former associate director of admissions at the law school. And for the last 10 years, I've actually been doing coaching for admissions for law. I actually coach for other programs too, but I like law the best. So I started really focusing on law about 5 years ago. And I really like helping people reach their goals. I still have availability to help you guys, and I love teaching. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of this class. So if you scan this QR code on the left, you will get to my Leland profile, and you can learn more about me and what I have to offer. But today we are going to talk about essays, and we can get started right now. So I really think, so the numbers are important, as we all know, but even people with, mid 170 LSAT and a 4.0 GPA will not get into law school if they don't really hone their essays really well. If you think about it, I mean, I guess the LSAT scores have been going up since they removed logic games. So there's a lot of people with high LSAT scores you're going to be competing with. And but I remember at Stanford, even when someone had a perfect GPA from a really well-reputed undergrad school and a really good LSAT score, if we read an essay and it was not, the narrative wasn't cohesive, or there was no message, or it seemed very like they were very vague of what their goals were, that would really kill the deal. So I think, and then there's those people that might not have the best GPA, maybe, mixed bag. Those essays can really help you move the needle. So I really encourage everyone to think hard, work hard, really pay attention to the essays. And I'm going to give you my tips and talk about my experience helping people with the essays, which I really think is the most important part of this whole deal. So we're going to go over essay prompts because they're all different. It's not like undergrad where you have your Common App and maybe your UCs for University of California. Every single law school essay prompt is totally different. It's nuanced. And so I think it's really important as the first step to look at those prompts and see what they're asking for. I recommend that everyone I work with have 2 essays ready to go at the end of this process. So like by this summer. So you're going to have one essay that is professionally flavored. That one will be kind of your background and your career trajectory and how a law degree will help you reach your goals. The other one is a personal essay. And that one just kind of demonstrates your personal attributes and positive characteristics that will kind of add value to a law school community. And believe it or not, that essay does not have to mention the word law. It can be completely different. So I'm going to go over some examples and what I mean. Optional essays, you might read on Reddit. And by the way, Reddit is the worst place to go when you're in the middle of the law school application cycle. There's all these warriors there who think they know everything. And every person that I talk to that is on Reddit and they come to me for advice is panicking because they heard something on Reddit that I usually refute or say it's just not true. So that's my little unsolicited piece of advice for you. So optional essays, I strongly believe are actually optional, and there's one exception, and we'll go over that, but for the most part, they're optional. If they're optional, you don't have to do them. And I think a big mistake people do sometimes is forcing themselves to do optional essays when they're not really feeling it, and then it doesn't come off authentic and actually can take away from your application. Then there's the why essays that are the tailored essay for the specific school, talking about why you're applying. So we'll go into how to make those impactful. As I said to those and to those that just joined, we are going to have a Q&A period at the end of this presentation. So we can wait. You could take yourself off mute later when we're doing the Q&A and ask me questions there. You can use the chat platform. I'll try and keep one eyeball on the chat in case there's a relevant question that's directly related to what I'm talking about, or if maybe I say something that you need clarification on. I'll try and keep paying attention to the chat box, but you will have time later to ask questions. Okay, so here I put together some sample essay prompts. These are from last year. And pay attention to like how they differ and what you think the schools are asking for. And we'll go over this later in more depth after I go over the content of my session. So Georgetown law does not have a minimum or maximum length for the personal statement, though we recommend around 2 pages double spaced. You can write your personal statement on any subject that will enable the admissions committee to get to know you. NYU. This is a brief statement. Make it no more than 500 words. It's also personal. Describe aspects about yourself, your accomplishments, or your academic and professional goals. Take a moment to reflect on these and consider including your thoughts about how they motivate you towards graduate study and or illuminate the reasons you're applying for one of our programs or a particular specialization. USC. The personal statement is your primary opportunity to discuss who you are beyond the application basics. We're particularly interested in how your background, academic or otherwise, has led to your decision to study law. This is not the place to repeat items on your resume. University of Chicago. The personal, don't worry, this isn't all we're doing today. Okay, I got a question from Yasmin. How do you recommend preparing for the different lengths? I'll talk about that, don't worry. University of Chicago. The personal statement is an essential part of every application, and it is your opportunity to introduce yourself to the admissions committee. It should demonstrate your contribution to the law school community beyond academics and should demonstrate your ability to communicate your thoughts effectively. The admissions committee often focuses on a unique personal attribute or experience. Sorry, I screwed that up. The admissions committee often finds that a personal statement focusing on a unique personal attribute or experience is usually the most informative, as opposed to a restatement of your qualifications or resume. That's the second school that's talked about. Don't just talk about what's on your resume. Fordham. While the topic of this required essay is up to you, the most successful personal statements are those that develop a sense of the applicant and their values, aspirations, and concerns. As Fordham's law school motto is in the service of others, we are also interested in hearing about contributions you would like to make to our student body, the legal profession, and ultimately the larger society. And lastly, UCLA. Discuss any matters relevant to your ability to succeed in law school and the practice of law, and the attributes, experiences, or interests that would enable you to make a distinctive contribution to UCLA law or the legal profession. So all of these prompts, they might have length limitations. They kind of give you hints what they're looking for. Chicago is like completely wide open. Georgetown is even more wide open, I think. It's just like, write whatever you want. They have a 2-page double spaced. I know Berkeley says 4 pages. I know that other schools say about 2 pages. So you do need to pay attention to that. I strongly believe that because the lowest common denominator for essay length is 2 pages double spaced, that's what you should shoot for. You do not have to write a different essay for every school. We're talking about their main prompt, like I just was reading here. If you have those 2 essays, professional and personal, that I mentioned before, and they're both 2 pages double spaced, you'll be golden for the main essay prompt. So 2 pages double spaced is really short. Part of this is showing that you can write concisely and get your point across. But Stanford, Yale, some of these top schools, they all say maximum 2 pages double spaced. And my strong opinion is that if Stanford says you can tell your story in 2 pages double spaced, then every other school should be satisfied with that story. So that's my recommendation. Fiddling with a 4-page essay and trying to make it 2 pages and just as good, you might as well just start over. I think it's very stressful and a waste of time. So if you shoot for 2 pages double spaced, you'll be good to go. Hopefully that answers your question, Yasmin. Okay. The professional essay. The purpose of the professional essay, so I mentioned it's kind of your background, your aspiration for law school. Usually there's like an aha moment or something that's really like moved you or motivated you. There's a problem in the world or a population that's suffering or a policy that you think is unfair. Whatever it is, that is kind of the crux of what the professional essay is going to be talking about. So the mission is to convince the adcoms that you deserve a seat in their class. Mentioning that you are still exploring what you want to do in your career, even if it's true, is not going to help your case. So if you compare 2 people with the same stats and one person writes an essay that says something like, I've always known I wanted to be a lawyer. I am a great writer. I love solving problems and negotiating and communicating. And I'm not really sure what the future holds for me. I'm going to explore that in law school, as opposed to someone who says, I took this class in undergrad. I learned about the problem of, I'm just going to make something up here, sex trafficking. I had never really understood how big a problem it was. And I started researching it, and I started reading these cases where a child was trafficked when she was 16, and then she became kind of a lead trafficker because she was scared that the boss was gonna, do something bad to her. So she got arrested and imprisoned for 17 years. And it just seemed unfair. And I am determined to change policy and laws so that people like this girl don't get in trouble when they were basically forced to do something against their will. That's an example. There's a million examples. I have another example of a woman who, she actually graduated college. She had about 5 years of work experience, and she was working at a big company that does internal audits, like corporate internal audits. So she was writing about how she had these meetings after she did the audit, and she figured out like all these problems that were in the paperwork and the tax filings and stuff. She would have to sit down with like the CFO and go, here is where you went wrong. These are big issues. You have to fix them. You're probably going to have to pay big fines because your taxes were all wrong or whatever. And it dawned on her, I mean, these were really hard calls. And it dawned on her that she would much rather be a tax attorney and help companies avoid these problems than like going in after the fact, finding problems, and then trying to explain what went wrong. She wanted to help people avoid the problems. So that's 2 examples of a professional statement. You might notice that these examples actually have kind of a storytelling aspect to it. Like this woman who was the auditor, she was describing having a meeting with a CFO who literally broke down and cried because he was scared he was going to jail. And then the sex trafficking one, it kind of like this person got moved by hearing about these cases and went into detail about, a specific example. So as some of those essay prompts said very clearly, don't rehash your resume. The resume is going to be like a supportive document. So no one gets in or denied from law school because of their resume, unless they lie on it. But if it's all factual, I mean, you want it to be easy to read. By the way, it can be 2 pages long. And you really want to flesh it out enough so that you don't have to say, at this job, I did these things, and at that job, I did these other things, and I learned XYZ and these skills. that's like a missed opportunity, because if you hash out your resume enough with those details, you don't have to talk about them in your essay. That's what I mean by a missed opportunity. If you don't hash out your resume enough and feel inclined to really talk about all the transactional work and the skills that you learned at the job, and you're using your essay to describe that, that is the missed opportunity, because your essay should really be more of a story, like what has inspired you over the years to do what you want to do with your life. And the resume is more transactional. Um, and yeah, so even the professional statement can be interesting and compelling. You really want to make the adcoms care about what you care about. Talk about how, getting a JD is imperative for you to help this cause, these people, whatever it is. It can be lofty. You don't want to be sound so lofty that you're like your head's in the clouds and there's no way you can accomplish all those things. But or it can be something small. It just has to be important to you. And if you tell your story authentically, it will come through that you deserve a place in the class because you are going to do good things, small or big. Okay. The other essay I recommend, and for those of you who joined a little late, you will get the link to this class, so you'll see what I've been talking about in the beginning. So don't stress about that if you came a little late. Okay, so the personal essay or diversity statement, they can kind of be interchangeable. That one is to convince the adcoms that you are a cool person who deserves to be a part of their community, that you'll make a positive impact. You have these great characteristics and attributes. You'll be a good friend, mentor. You will, add something valuable to conversations and discussions and other opportunities, and that they'll like having you there. So, don't sound arrogant. You should pick a story. This is a harder essay than the other one. I think if you really know why you're applying to law school, the professional statement should be pretty easy to start fleshing out and talking about. The personal one, the hard part is there is no right and wrong answer about what the topic should be. It should be a topic, a story, an experience, a pivotal moment, a moment of growth, that kind of, as you tell the story, you imply all these great things about you. So if you can think of a story that implies the most great things, that's probably the topic. If you start writing a story and you're like, and you feel stuck or have writer's block, it might not be the right topic, and that's fine. I work with a lot of people who start off thinking about one topic and then they get stuck. And then when we do a brainstorming session, we might come up with a topic that, just flows out of them. A lot of this is filtering yourself. It feels very kind of threatening almost to your ego in a way, or scary. And it's very anxiety provoking to think you're going to be telling these stories to people who are sitting in a room at a conference, in a conference room at a table, reading your story and like judging you on it and deciding your life basically. It's monumental. And that's why I really recommend you work with someone on these essays, whether it's me or someone else, because I help break through that fear and get people to actually, start writing and expressing. And if you're worried about it being cliche or cheesy, I help mitigate that. A lot of people don't want to tell a story because they think it's overdone. But if you think about it, your story is going to be different than every other story because your experience is totally different. Even if it has a similar arc or theme, I don't worry about that stuff. I mostly worry about whether the story is authentic and it's expressing positive attributes about yourself that make the adcoms like you. So, and I'll go over some sample topics that I've read that I loved. So one pitfall that people sometimes fall into is talking about mental health or trauma, even if it is a really important experience that helped form who you are. One of the things I think about this process, it's almost like a risk assessment. So one of the things you want to avoid is implying, because you can talk about anything, right? So if you pick a topic that implies risk, if the adcoms read your essay and go, this sounds really hard. I wonder if she's really strong enough to thrive, or if she's healed enough, or if he's like, ready to really focus on school. Um, they don't want to admit someone who might fail. And so if you imply something huge about yourself that could seem as a negative, even if it to you feels like the most important thing, I would avoid it. It can work. Um, but usually it's a lot of discussing. And sometimes people choose to write about trauma or mental health, um, and it works, but most of the time I talk people out of it. Yasmin. Oh, Miriam. I'm sorry. I'm like totally behind. Sorry. Allison. Okay, so Allison, I'm not sure if you were here at the very beginning, and I will go over it at the end, but my strategy is I have all of my clients who work with me on admissions, their admissions process, have 2 essays so that you can basically, you're going to analyze the prompts, and some prompts are asking for a personal statement if you read them, and some are asking for a professional. No one calls it a professional statement. I should be clear about that. If you look at the prompts, it's not going to say professional statement. That's my terminology. It's about what the topic is, whether it's professional, meaning your career-based story, or if it's personal, meaning something else. And also the reason I like having 2 essays of different topics ready to go is if you look at all the writing requirements for the schools, some schools have a main required essay, some have 2 required essays, some have 1 main required essay and several optional essays, and some supplemental requirements. And so within all of those kind of essay prompts and supplemental, optional, etc., you will probably be able to use both of those essays when you first submit. And that's really nice because then they'll get your professional story and your personal story. If there is no way to easily and logically use both essays up front, you can most likely use it when you're waitlisted. When people are waitlisted, most schools say you can submit a new essay or some more materials. And so then you can send in the one you didn't send before. Everyone's going to be waitlisted in this class, I guarantee you. I have never worked with someone in the last 10 years that had no waitlist offers. And it seems like the waitlists are getting bigger and bigger. So be prepared for that. Miriam, do I have to make it related to my proposal topic? I am not sure what that means. I'm sorry. Can you ground this personal story in a professional experience that reflects your personal values, noting that your professional essay highlights your broader career journey? Yeah, sometimes they can overlap. And sometimes it works really well. I had one woman who she talked about in her professional essay how she was in an economics class and they were talking about distribution of societal resources, and the topic of being unhoused or homeless came up. And all of a sudden it dawned on her that her whole life up until that moment when she was 19 years old, she was homeless. She had always thought of being homeless as a person living under a bridge in a tent or pushing a shopping cart around. She didn't think of herself as homeless because she always had a roof over her head. They were just crashing at friends' houses and cousins, and she always thought of it as fun sleepovers. But the fact was her family could not afford their own house, renting or buying. So it just kind of like was her aha moment, and she became an advocate for the unhoused. The advocacy work was her professional statement, and the personal statement was when she discovered she was unhoused herself. Does that help, Yasmin? So Alana, we're going to do an exercise later, and we will go over those 6 prompts that I went over in the beginning, and we will discuss what they're asking for. So hopefully that will help you. And yes, you can flip them. So depending on how the prompts are written, one exercise I do with my clients is I look at all the prompts from all the schools on their list, and I'll be like, for this prompt, use your professional statement. For this prompt, use your personal statement, or vice versa. So yes, if you take the time, and I think this is something that is it's something that not everyone does. A lot of people just go into this with one essay, and I think it's a missed opportunity. And I think that this two essay approach is actually quite a good strategy. It works really well. Been doing it for a long time. Faith. I can't go into specific suggestions. I think that would actually, and I need to keep moving along. Um, and they don't have to overlap because you must have other stories, personal stories that have nothing to do with your career aspirations. I mean, I have people successfully get into top 14 schools and their personal statements. One woman I recall was talking about how the first time she fostered a cat from the SPCA. Someone else talked about ballroom dancing. I have a lot of people talk about overcoming an injury from athletics. I have people talking about their families. I had one woman who talked about growing up in a very small conservative town in Texas, then going to NYU for college and realizing that she was raised racist. She was like in such a bubble. She was never exposed to anyone other than those that were just like her. And then she went to NYU and was like, oh my gosh, my parents and everyone's racist in my family. And she was open-minded, but when she went back home for Christmas, they had a lot of hard and good conversations. And that has nothing to do with what she was doing for work. It was just, a personal top story that showed, so if you talk about like with the rescuing cat one, the attributes that came out from her was she brought this cat home. It was sick. It was angry. She had to give it medicine, and she got bit and scratched, and she was ready to just give the cat back. But then she figured out some creative solutions on how to give the cat medicine, and all these great attributes were demonstrated with this story about a cat, which was like she was a creative problem solver. She was persistent and resilient, determined, and also altruistic. Like she was fostering a homeless cat, so that's like helping the community in some way. So you can see, like, in the ballroom dancing guy, he was a guy, which was cool, but his story was that he was practicing ballroom dancing with his partner for a competition, and he kept messing up the steps, and he was like getting very frustrated, and he realized it was because he wasn't paying attention to the rhythm and the music. He literally his head was off in Never Never Land thinking about whatever. And so he brought his mind back into the present, and he did much better. But in that exercise of figuring out that he was not in his head, he realized he was not in the moment. He was always in his head. He realized that he's always in his head, not just during ballroom dancing. He's taking a walk, he's not noticing the environment, the pretty scenery. He's talking to a friend and not listening because he's ready to speak and wants to get his point across, so he misses the whole conversation. Or he's talking on the phone to his mom and like thinking about groceries that he has to buy. And so he was realizing that he was kind of going through life and missing it. And it just kind of like at the ballroom dancing aha moment kind of bled into the rest of his life. And he became much more mindful and a better friend, a better family member, a better student, whatever. It was just kind of this evolution of him. So that's another example of a personal statement. So I guarantee that even if you are sitting here in this session going, I don't know, I have nothing, it's going to overlap too much, I guarantee you that's not true. If you take a moment to think, every one of you will probably be able to think of at least two stories that have good potential for your personal statement. I promise. Okay. Ready to talk about the optional essays, everyone? Any questions about the personal? Okay. Everyone's so quiet. No one's talking or chatting. Okay. So optional essays. Every school has optional essays. Some have one, some have 5. The key thing about the optional essays, okay, let's say Georgetown. Georgetown, I think, has 5 or 6. Some of them are like, think of a time you had a disagreement with someone. What would you do differently? Something to that effect. Now, you might read that prompt and go, I can't think of a good example of this, or I wouldn't do anything differently, and that kind of maybe comes off as arrogant. If you read a prompt like that and you're like, I don't know, and it's hard and you're worried, just don't do it. Only do optional prompts if you're like, oh, I have the perfect example of this. Now, there's some optional prompts that are just for fun and they're just trying to get to know a little bit of color about you. So, like, something more kind of something different, new and different. So, like, Stanford has one that says your local library burned down. What three books would you add to the new library and why? Um, that's kind of a fun one. And then out of Georgetown's, they have like, give us your favorite top 10 list. I've had people write about, like, I had a tennis player who picked her top 10 tennis courts. I had someone write about her favorite boba tea places. I've had some really hilarious ones. So just have fun with it. They literally want you to have fun and just kind of like go with it. So I like that one. They also have an optional 1-minute video. I hate that one. I shouldn't say I hate it, but out of my clients that have done the 1-minute video, I'd say, so I've been doing this for like 10 years, I'd say maybe 10% were worth actually submitting. So if you're not feeling confident on video, just leave that one alone. But just go through the prompts, pick the ones that you like. If there's several optional prompts, I would do at least one just so you don't seem lazy. If there's one optional prompt, it's okay if you don't do it. So it's kind of like a mixed bag, and you should see how you feel. The only optional essay that I don't think is optional is when a school says, why do you like Fordham? Why do you want to go here? In that case, I would definitely do it because it's kind of like, tell us why you love us. And if you don't do that, then I think that can look bad. But I do feel like there are most of my clients don't answer all the optional essays and they do just fine. I do really think less is more too. It's kind of the same thing as the 4-page essay at Berkeley. Thinking back on when I was reading all these essays at Stanford, a 4-page essay, I would just look at it and be like, ugh, and put it aside and read it later because usually I was tired. I've already read like a million essays, and then thinking about reading one 4-page essay about one person was like overwhelming and annoying. And I would just like delay and procrastinate. And you have to remember these are real people actually making these decisions. So you want to make it easy and as fun for them as possible. And if you can say your story in 2 pages double spaced, why not do that? I think and as I said before, yeah, let's say you're applying to Berkeley and Stanford. Berkeley is 4 pages, Stanford is 2. Just send a 2-page essay to both of them. If it's good enough for Stanford, it's good enough for Berkeley. I promise you. Okay, next. The why essays. You don't know how many essays with the theme of why do you like our school, why you are applying to the school that I have read that are completely generic. And it's so annoying. It's like, Stanford has world-renowned faculty and really smart students, and the weather is beautiful. It's like, yeah, I know, but tell us something different. So don't even bother doing it if it's so generic that it means nothing. So I encourage you to do your research and maybe do research above and beyond just the admissions websites. I find a lot of people end up telling the adcoms what they have to offer. The adcoms know. So you don't have to like say the clinic that does this, that, and the other thing. They know. And the professor who runs the clinic, they know who's running the clinic. What you can do, and what I encourage you to do, is look at your own experiences and match them with something the school has to offer. So you can say, I'm very interested in working with this clinic because my experience doing XYZ will add value to the work you're doing there. So it's almost like a ping pong game where you're like, I like this about you and I can do this for you. I like this other thing about you and I can add this to that. So it's kind of like, you should admit me because not only will I take advantage of all the opportunities and resources that you have for me, I will add value to your community. How do you balance that? doing that without rehashing what's on your resume? That's a good question. I don't worry about that too much. These optional essays are super short. And if you, I wouldn't worry about it, but I think you should be specific. So like if you talk about, you don't want to be, you don't have to be so transactional. I mean, you can be like, this clinic that is there, I had this experience working with a client or whatever in this other place, like a specific thing that will help, that experience that I had will help, other people work with similar clients or situations. Does that make sense? So yeah, you don't have to say, oh, I'm good at, these skills and therefore, and if the skills are on your resume, that is redundant. But if you think more about like experiences that you've had that may not be necessarily fleshed out on your resume, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. Does that help? Okay. Should we use imagery and more narrative language or not in this? In the, yeah, so the Y essays are usually pretty short. Oh, and by the way, Georgetown, for example, doesn't have a Y essay prompt. Excuse me, I need a little water. But the dean of admissions, when he's speaking to people in person, says he really likes to read why people are applying to Georgetown. So that's kind of an insider tip that you should try and work it into the end of your Georgetown professional essay. So the Georgetown professional essay will be, all your professional story, and I'm applying to Georgetown because of XYZ reasons. And Georgetown says about 2 pages, I think, so you can just tack it on to the bottom. But you don't have to force yourself to do Y essays if they don't ask. So yeah, so you can build it into the professional, but if they don't ask in the prompt, you don't have to force yourself to do that. But if you leave a little room in your essay, your main essay, so that you don't have to fiddle with it too much to add that, if they do ask in the prompt, it makes sense. But you should look at all the prompts for your whole, your school list before you start like figuring out which kinds of essays plug into where, and see which essay prompts ask for that why. And it seems to kind of work out, but I do help people shorten their main professional statement sometimes if they have to add the why part to the end, if it's a 2-page double spaced situation. But many schools do say about 2 pages, so you can kind of work it out. Okay. So go beyond the mission. So another thing, and I actually recommend this to everyone who's applying to law school, not just for the essays and the Y essays, but just in general, like putting together your school list, talking to alums from your school, your college. So go to LinkedIn, get on the alum network, look at people that went to your college who went to law school. And most people that, they like to help alums out, you already have something in common. And so you can reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm applying to law school this fall. I see you went to Georgetown, and I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind answering a couple of questions, like what did you love? What would you have done differently? If you could go back in time, would you not go there, or would you go there again? How hard was it to get a job? Look at people who are doing cool things that their job looks awesome. Ask them how they got there. But this also will help with your why, because you might find out some cool little tidbits of information that isn't published anywhere from a person that actually went there. If you can't think of anything to say, why are you applying to this school? Honestly. So think about that. Okay. Now let's go back to the prompts, and we are going to read them again. You bear with me, I'm going to read them out loud again, but then I'm going to ask you what you think they're asking for, a professional story or a personal story. Georgetown, and you can just type it in the chat. Georgetown law does not have a minimum or maximum length for the personal statement. And remember, the schools are not going to say professional statement ever. That's just my terminology talking about the theme of the essay. They all call it a personal statement, statement of purpose, statement of perspective. The word professional isn't there, but that's just kind of how I discern between the two types of essays. Georgetown law does not have a minimum or maximum length for the personal statement, though we recommend around 2 pages double spaced. You can write your personal statement on any subject that will enable the admissions committee to get to know you. Are there any hints there? What are they asking for? Yep, personal. Good job. Now, the cool thing about Georgetown is they do have all these optional essays, and I think one of them is like, tell us something else about you. So that is very easy. You can put the professional for one and the personal for the other. You done and done. You get to upload both of your essays and you're good to go. NYU. This is a brief statement. Make it no more than 500 words. It's also personal. Describe aspects about yourself, your accomplishments, or your academic and professional goals. Take a moment to reflect on these and consider including your thoughts about how they motivate you towards graduate study and or illuminate the reasons you are applying for one of our programs or a particular specialization. What do you think? Yep, I agree. Even though they say it's also personal, when you get to the part that I underlined, then you can see like they're actually saying, take a moment to reflect on why you're motivated for law school and why you're applying to the program. Okay, USC. The personal statement is your primary opportunity to discuss who you are beyond the application basics. We're particularly interested in how your background, academic or otherwise, has led to your decision to study law. This is not the place to repeat items on your resume. This one's pretty easy. Oh, maybe it wasn't easy. Jordan, um, so I think it's professional because it has says how your background has led your decision to study law. Remember that the personal one doesn't have to talk about why you want to be a lawyer at all. So they put it in what, why you want to study law, so that makes it a professional one. It's kind of tricky sometimes. University of Chicago. The personal statement is an essential part of every application, and it's your opportunity to introduce yourself to the admissions committee. It should demonstrate your contribution to the law school community beyond academics and should demonstrate your ability to communicate your thoughts effectively. The admissions committee often finds that a personal statement focusing on a unique personal attribute or experience is usually the most informative, as opposed to a restatement of your qualifications or resume. So they're actually saying they don't want a professional statement. So the underlying part kind of gives the hint. The admissions committee often finds that a personal statement focusing on a unique personal attribute or experience is usually the most informative. And they're kind of saying, as opposed to, your professional life, while they're saying a restatement of qualifications or a resume. So I think they're asking for a purely personal. And the good news is University of Chicago has an optional essay where you can do a professional statement. So that's why I really think it's a good idea to have these two essays ready to go, whether it's applying up front with two essays or when you're waitlisted. If you don't have the opportunity to put both essays in up front, you can send it in when you're waitlisted with your letter of continued interest, which is a whole nother topic. Fordham. While the topic of this required essay is up to you, the most successful personal statements are those that develop a sense of the applicant and their values, aspirations, and concerns. As Fordham Law School's motto is in the service of others, we're also interested in hearing about contributions you would like to make to our student body, the legal profession, and ultimately the larger society. So even though they called it a personal statement, I actually think this one is professional with a why paragraph at the end. So aspirations is there. Concerns might be like your aspirations to get a law degree to help with your concerns. The values can come through with your professional statement as well when you're talking about what's important to you and how you want to help. And then at the bottom, it says contributions you would like to make to our student body, the legal profession, and ultimately the larger society. So talking about contributing to the legal profession and the larger society is also talking about like long term what you want to do with a law degree. So I really think this really comes together as a professional essay. UCLA. Discuss any matters relevant to your ability to succeed in law school and the practice of law, and any attributes, experiences, or interests that would enable you to make a distinctive contribution to UCLA law or the legal profession. This one's probably the easiest one. Yeah, professional. They pretty much lay it right out there for you. So hopefully this is all coming together to make sense with the strategy of the two different essays and why it's important to try and like plug both in and look at the prompts very carefully to make sure you are answering them appropriately. Okay, I kind of already said this. The majority of schools have a 2-page double-spaced limit. That's the lowest common denominator, so you should shoot for that length, even if they allow for longer. If you're thinking, what is the AdCom looking for? You're doing it wrong. So AdCom comes together, and they're not sitting there with like hopes and dreams about what the incoming class is going to look like and what they're going to talk about. It's literally just like, give me what you got. So don't worry about trying to answer that question of what are they looking for. Just be authentic, tell your story, whether it's your professional story or a personal story, and you'll be fine. All right. Now is the time. You can ask me anything. It doesn't even have to be about essays. I've been doing this a long time, so I think I know a lot about a lot of different topics. So you can ask me about the LSAT. You can ask me about letters of rec, the the LSAC system, whatever it is. And you can unmute yourself now, or raise your hand, or okay, Sydney. How do you brainstorm topics? Great idea. So I actually have a couple brainstorm documents that I send to my people, one's for professional and one's for personal essays. But I think what you want to do, kind of reverse engineer it in terms of the professional. I think most people find the professional essay a little bit easier because they're going to law school for the most part for a reason and usually have some experience or idea or aha moment or something in their life that has pushed them in that direction. And so hopefully you can like pick a few experiences to really talk about in more depth than your resume can. And it's pretty prescribed. It's like, here's my background, here's my experience, here's what I want to do with my life, this is why I need a law degree to get there, and my plans in the future. So okay, I'm behind. Okay, so yeah, so the personal statement is a little bit harder, but I think that what you should do is think about like what would your best friend say about you, or your mom? Like what are your best attributes? And then think too about what you're proud of, and like the attributes that I actually have a list of like adjectives and attributes that people can think about. So there's things like empathy, resilience, perseverance, and critical problem solving, and mentorship or leadership, and helpful, taking time to help others. Whatever it is, being open-minded, being adventurous, being flexible. I mean, you could go on and on. Think about, 4 or 5 things about you, and then think about a story that kind of demonstrates them. You don't want to have to like list out these things, but as you tell the story, the reader will be like, "Oh, I get it. She has empathy, she's altruistic, she's a great problem solver, she thinks out of the box, she's super adaptable." So kind of do it that way. When should you start asking for letters of rec? Yesterday. It's time. If you're asking professors, I would ask now because fall gets super busy. So try and send them an email and ask them now. And if you're still in college, then you can maybe go to office hours the first week of school and tell them that you're applying. But give them like a month to do it. And also give them as much information as possible so that it's easy. You don't want to just go, hey, write me a letter of rec, thanks, and then just let them, figure it out on their own, because that might be daunting and hard, and they might put it off. The worst thing is asking someone to write a letter and they flake. and then your application isn't complete. So I always recommend ask for people. And if you have 4 letters, it's no harm, no foul. The schools don't know how many letters you have, and you get to pick which letters go to which schools. And if you ask them for a letter and they upload it and you never use it, they're never going to know. So I would ask for extra. And also, it's nice to have extra waiting in the wings, because if you're waitlisted, you can submit a new letter of rec. No, thank you, Jordan, for the question about the personal statement and the letters of rec. They do not need your personal statement. A lot of people kind of are easily inclined to assume that they need it, especially the personal statement. That's not going to help them at all. What they need is your resume. If it's been a while, you want to refresh them, like maybe a conversation you had, or a project you did, or a paper you wrote that you like in, or if you were a TA or whatever. And then also, what I would do if they ask for their personal statement is say, I haven't even started it yet, but here is my aspirations for law school. And you can do kind of like a little synopsis of what your professional statement will be, but it doesn't have to be polished and fleshed out. So that's my recommendation for that. If applying the cycle, when do you think we should start writing? So if you're still, Erica, are you still studying for your LSAT?
Yes.
Okay. So I know it's a struggle, especially if people are working full-time studying for the LSAT, then they have to write the essays. I would say, start brainstorming. When you have a free moment, you can do like a bullet list or an outline, different ideas. So you don't have to like start writing a polished essay right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I tell most of my people, like, shooting to apply October, like mid-October is fine. So are you taking the August LSAT, Erica?
I am.
Okay. So yeah, so I mean, you should have time, but I think if you have at least brainstormed a little bit and you aren't starting from scratch the minute the LSAT is over, it will just help kind of like slow your roll and not be so, you won't be so anxious about it. In terms of hiring someone, so personally, I have room for a few more clients, but it's starting to so you can do free intro calls at Leland for 15 minutes, kind of shop around for a coach. I'm getting like 10 a day.
Okay.
And so I am going to fill up. So yeah, and I'm sure other coaches are in the same boat. So when you're looking for a coach, just like you might get overwhelmed because there are a lot of different options. So you should think about your budget, obviously. You should also think about what you pay for. So like, I'm more expensive than a lot of the other coaches, but I've also been a professional coach for 10 years and I worked at Stanford, whereas some of the coaches are brand new, and some coaches, like, their only experience is that they got into Stanford or Harvard or whatever themselves, and now they want to help others, which, to be honest, I don't know if like just their own experience one time applying to law school is enough to give advice to a broad number of people. My 2 cents. But yeah, you can do free calls. Actually, let me go to the next slide. So if you scan my QR, it'll take you directly to my Leland profile, and you can schedule an intro call with me. And I'm open for those. They're 15 minutes long. It's about the coaching relationship, what I have to offer. I have like hourly, some people hire me for a couple hours just to review stuff. Other people, I have a package where you can sign up now and I'm with you for a whole year, supporting you throughout the way. I give out my phone number. You can text me when I need to talk you off the ledge. And I help with every single dingle thing that you would ever have to do having to do with any of the schools you're applying for, from start until when you decide where you're going. So that's called the comprehensive package. And then there's everything in between. And most coaches have similar offerings. And yes, if you like this class and found it helpful, I hope you did. When you leave, you can give a thumbs up. And then if you give a thumbs up, you can give me a 5-star rating. I would really, really appreciate it. It really helps me out. Okay, so letters of rec. I answered Jordan's. Erica. Chase, how has your perspective changed on law school admissions from working for Stanford admissions to independently coaching? Perspective on admissions. I think I have a broader perspective, and I've worked with people So like it's a totally different experience because as an adcom, I'm seeing all the materials after they've been produced and submitted. Whereas when I'm helping people from day one, a lot of times like their essays are all over the place. They don't know who to write letters, who should write their letters of rec. Their resume is all over the place. And so I love helping people, start from point A and get to point B. And then they have these great outcomes getting to top schools. And I know for a fact if they had done it alone, that wouldn't have happened because they just weren't, they didn't know enough, and that's why I think coaching is really helpful. And that's why I like doing it because I know how heartbreaking it is when someone puts in so much work into this process and then they don't get the outcomes that they're hoping for. um it's gutting. I mean, it just sucks. I have people come to me after they've had an unsuccessful, um like they were waitlisted everywhere and didn't get in anywhere, or they didn't get in anywhere at all. And I if they hire me to work with them and I look at their materials, I pretty much can tell them exactly what happened. And so I think that's why I really think hiring someone with experience will help you, because especially with, enough experience, and also the fact that I was behind that desk on the adcom, like working with the professors who were making these big decisions, and I read every single application. I think that combined with what I've been doing for the last 10 years has really come together to make me a really good coach, if I do say so myself. Braggy braggy, sorry. Okay, back to the questions. And I can stay for another 5-10 minutes if you guys want to stay to have your questions answered. You also can hop off and you will get a link to the recording. So and then also if you have questions that are individual to yourself, then please do sign up for a free call with me, and I'm happy to meet with you within the next couple weeks. I have availability next week for sure, and I'd love to see some of you and get to know you a little bit. Okay. Okay, I answered Chase's. Dana, is applying by the end of October fine, or should I aim for September? So I think aiming for as early as possible is smart if you're ready. I don't want people to stress out and then submit a less than optimal essays or materials because they're trying to race for that September opening day. If you think about it, and this is how it was at Stanford, we really didn't start making a lot of decisions till November. The bulk of decisions were over the winter holiday. Um, when the application opened, we get like 10 apps. We wouldn't even decide on those 10 apps, even if they were, 180 LSAT and 4.0s, because you don't want to put, if you have like another 5 months of applications coming in, why would we fill 10 slots? That's 5% of the class. Why would we fill 10 slots with it's not first come first serve. It's also very comparative. So we need a critical mass to be able to start making smart decisions. So I don't think September. I mean, I have a lot of people that are like, I'm aiming for September. I do like a big overarching timeline for my clients. And I usually put the submit, it's like a yellow square on the Excel with stars on it, mid-October. Even if you are talking about the end of October or mid-November, you will have positive outcomes if all your stuff is good. If sometimes people are planning on September and then something happens, they have to go on a work trip or something unexpected pops up, it's not a time to panic. Just, slow down, do what you need to do, and then apply with everything ready to go and as perfect as it can be by mid to late October. And even you could even push it out a little later. By the time we're getting to, December 15, I think that's getting a little bit sketch. I mean, although I do hear people apply even in February, like on the deadline, and they get in somewhere, but I wouldn't risk that. Okay, say a school's median is 170 and median GPA is 3.8. How much of a deficit with a strong? It depends. It depends. I guess it depends on how much lower your LSAT is and your GPA is. So you can feel free to make a call with me because we could maybe talk about that specific school. But I mean, I've had some pretty amazing results. I remember a guy, he came to me and he had applied to a lot of schools the year before and he didn't get in anywhere. He had a 2.6 GPA and a 170 LSAT. So he was a splitter, but he got into UVA and a couple other top 20 schools actually with that 2.6. And I honestly think it was the essay because I read his old essay and it was not great. So, oh my goodness, so many more questions. For the open-ended prompts like Georgetown, can we choose the professional over personal if we think it's better? Yes, absolutely. Choose the one you like. If it's totally wide open, you do what you want to do. Your personal statements, ACAD diversity statements, been viewed differently given recent decisions on race-blind admissions. So no, don't. Law schools still care about underrepresented minorities, even if the Supreme Court says they shouldn't care, they do. So if you have the opportunity to work that in to your essay, you know, authentically and like your culture is important to you. I do remember, this is kind of an insider tip. The Stanford dean, when I was working there, she really cared about, because back then, so now I think you still will click on an ethnicity box, but it's blind to the schools. So even though, I don't know, now that the Department of Education is supposedly being dismantled, maybe they won't even do this anymore. But for the last couple of years, there was still a box that said ethnicity, and the schools wouldn't even see it. But then they were asking for personal statements, and I did encourage people to bring it up. But I remember the dean at Stanford would read, if there was a checkbox that said someone was African American or Puerto Rican or whatever, she would read the essay, and if there was no mention of it anywhere in the narrative, she would actually make a note that there was no ties to that culture, and that made a difference. I would definitely work it in if you can. I think they still do care. It's important to them and their diversity and diversity of thought and perspective and backgrounds. I mean, diversity is a lot of different things. It's not just ethnicity, but I do think that the law schools do care about ethnicity. Okay. Do law schools prefer 2 or 3 professor LORs versus professional? It depends. Don't you love it when I say that? I think it's okay. If you're in school or you're out of school 1 or 2 years, do the get your professors to write you letters. They mean a lot more. They are weighted more, believe it or not. The AdCom's first and foremost goal is to admit people who are going to thrive as a student, right? When you pass the bar and you're working, that's a long ways away. They want to admit good students. So your professors, if you can, even if you're out of school for a long time, get at least 1 professor if you can. It means a lot. The professors will say, you know, things like best student I had in my 10 years, or this person, you know, was such an amazing contributor to our discussions, or whatever it is. That's what they care about right now. So if you're out of school 3 or more years and you just can't get a professor to write you a letter, then the work ones are fine. But you should always try to get professors. Do you believe that an applicant having 2 to 3 years work experience can slightly offset a below median? Uh-oh, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. My earbuds just died. They last exactly 1 hour when I'm talking. So, okay, so what was I saying? I was saying, oh, 2 to 3 work. 2 to 3 is a little bit little to really offset a GPA. So if you have a less than median GPA and 2 years work experience, it's depending on how impactful your work experience is, but most people that are just out of college might not have such like a
dynamic career history, it's usually more like 5 to 10 years. I hate to tell you something you don't want to hear, but I honestly think the motivation and aspiration to go to Harvard, Stanford, Yale is over, I don't know. Just, diversify a little bit. Everyone who wants to be a lawyer will be a lawyer. You don't have to go or be a policymaker or make an impact in some way with a JD. You do not have to go to Harvard to do that. So when I work with people, they're like, I only want to go to top 10, otherwise I'm not going to school. It really makes me upset because they have these amazing aspirations. So one of the things I talk to people, I do help people put together school lists. And if you are way, below the medians, it's a reach. That's just the way it is. An essay can help, good letters of rec can help, but it's not magic, right? So I really recommend that you do research to diversify your list. There are some amazing local schools. Like if you want to land and do your career in a specific location, pick a top law school for that location. So for example, I live in the Bay Area. There's of course Stanford and Berkeley, but there's a private school called Santa Clara University that has the #4 IP program in the country. They're right in the heart of the Silicon Valley. Google, Meta, Facebook, Yahoo, Apple is what I was trying to say, recruit from there, as do really well reputed high-tech law firms and companies in San Jose up through San Francisco. And it's not that competitive. But the people I know that have gone to Santa Clara and want to go into technology law, even AI, they have these amazing programs and career outcomes, and they make a lot of money. I mean, it's great. You do not have to go to Stanford if you want to be in the Bay Area. So that's my little lecture, and I encourage you to try and diversify your list a little bit. Okay. Is it okay to use a letter of rec that was written many years ago when you were still in college? I'm not sure how you would use it because they have to be uploaded directly by the person. Also, probably not. I don't know how old you are. If you were in college and you're just graduated, then it's probably fine, but you're going to have to ask that person to write a new letter because you can't upload them yourself. For non-KJD applicants, what is most valuable in a manager supervisor's letter of rec? I would advise them to remind them of stuff that you are proud of. I mean, there's adjectives and attributes that I think a good lawyer needs. And so, maybe think of a project that you did with that person or some work that you did where you demonstrated your whatever attributes they are, and have them focus on that. You can be very specific, especially if the manager hasn't really done much letter writing for schools. I think they want help because they don't want to just kind of make it up and do something wrong. So yeah, I also, that's another thing I help with is putting together, I call it a packet. It's not really a packet of the paragraph and other, whatever it is that I, so that you can make it easy for the people to write letters of rec. Okay, sorry we ran so late. I have to hop off in 3 minutes. If an applicant's LSAT score is below a law school median's, but their GPA and written materials are strong, is it still worth applying? I guess it depends how low or how much lower. So it's not really fair that the LSAT seems to be counted more than a 4-year degree, but it is what it is. I wish it was not how it is, but the LSAT is maybe the most important or one of the most important aspects of this. I always encourage people to apply to a couple dream schools. You can't get in if you don't apply. And remember, it's a subjective, person-based, process where people will read your essay and maybe be moved, or they'll have some sort of, maybe they love your undergrad school, or there's so many things that go into this that isn't predictable. And sometimes it's crazy. Like I had a client whose NYU was her first choice. Her first response was a Fordham rejection. And she practically, I had to talk her off the ledge because she was like, not going to get into anywhere now because Fordham rejected me. Well, she did get into NYU. So go figure, right? NYU, Fordham, and Fordham didn't want her. There's a lot of things to the admissions too that we don't think about. I think like there's themes in the world, like right now, immigration and con law, and a few years back it was all tech, and so the schools can't admit everyone who wants to do the same thing, so they really mix it up. And so there's a lot of factors that go into this process that aren't really, like, we can't really put a finger on. And so I always encourage people, like if you're below the 25th percentile, that's really reach. And that's a dream school, right? So apply to 2 of them. If your list is heavy on those dreams, then I think you're kind of like fooling yourself. And I fear that you won't have the outcomes that you want. Being waitlisted, people think of it as not really a rejection, and which is kind of true, but Georgetown had a 6,200 person wait list last year. So, I mean, come on. What are your thoughts on applying 1 to 2 master programs? Yeah, I mean, back up. If you have varied interests, then apply to master's programs too, or go to a 1-year master's program and then apply to law school after you have some experience in something. There's really no right or wrong answer to the path. I think a lot of my people are applying while they're in a master's program. If you are applying, I mean, the one thing you should think about is applying to law school is strenuous enough. And then if you're applying to master's programs, it's a totally different process. And that might be just in terms of your bandwidth. But if you feel like your profile, like you could get a higher LSAT, or if the work you do with your master's program will help bolster your profile for law school, then maybe you should take a year and do a master's degree first. But that would be something that I would like to bounce off you. If you were interested, we could like kind of brainstorm. Is it better to apply for a job? Also, is it better to apply for a job? I'm sorry, Tammy, I'm not really sure. Better than what? Are you talking about better than a master's program? I'm going to go to the next question, unless you want to pipe in. How do you
better than masters?
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
Better than masters. So those.
I never recommend people deciding on life choices like that based upon their law school admissions. So if there's an amazing job that pops up that you want to apply for because it's going to help you kind of like go towards your goals, take it. If you find a master's program and not a job, then do that. But don't think of it just in terms of law school. Just think of it in terms of like enriching your experience. That's kind of my overall advice. So either one is helpful, right? But it doesn't matter. I think the most important thing is you're passionate about it. How do you suggest someone make sure their addendum for GPA or LSAT is effective? I think I'm actually really good at these because people sometimes want to write like a 3-page essay about it. And it's like, dude, 1 paragraph, short and sweet, not a sob story. Don't sound like it's making excuses. If you have a legit, reason that you have a less than ideal GPA or LSAT, just, boom, boom, boom. I have a client whose father actually passed away sophomore year. And she it sounded like a diversity statement. And so I really encouraged her to move a lot of that content out into her essay and just make the addendum like, it's just like, there was a family tragedy. My father passed away. I was going back and forth to see him while he was sick, and my grades suffered. That's all I mean, it's super understandable, and it doesn't have to be like, you know, a flowery essay. It's just like an explanation. Okay, guys, I still have some of you here. Oh, I think I got through all the questions. Yay. Okay, so that was super fun. I hope you enjoyed it and got some good info. Give me a review if you have the chance. I would really appreciate it. I have space for more clients this cycle, so ping me, scan this QR right here, and you can get directly to my profile and schedule some intro calls. All right, have a good night, everyone.